The snow had been falling since dusk, a steady curtain of white that blurred the city lights into a pale, trembling haze. Gabriel Ward guided his sleek black car through the near-empty streets, the rhythmic swish of the wipers slicing through the hush of the storm. His daughter, Lila, sat in the back seat, her small hands pressed against the window, eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy, look," she whispered, watching the flakes swirl like tiny feathers. "It's snowing harder." Gabriel nodded, glancing briefly in the rearview mirror. "Yes, it is. We'll be home soon, sweetheart. You'll have your cocoa and blanket before you know it." Lila smiled faintly, but her gaze drifted back to the world outside. The snow gave the streets an almost magical stillness, and yet beneath that calm, there was something lonely about it. Gabriel felt it too, a quiet ache that came every winter, especially when he saw the empty passenger seat beside him. He tightened his grip on the wheel, forcing the thought away. It had been 3 years since Emily passed, and though he had learned to manage the pain, he had never quite escaped it. Work filled his days, Lila filled his heart, but the house still felt too big, too quiet. A red light forced him to stop near the corner of Maple and 7th. The street lamps glowed faintly through the swirling snow, illuminating the pavement below. Lila leaned forward suddenly, pressing her face close to the glass. "Daddy," she said softly, then louder, "Daddy, look." Gabriel turned his head, following her gaze. Under the dim light of a bus stop shelter, a young woman sat hunched over, clutching a small bundle wrapped in a tattered blanket. Her shoulders shook as the wind whipped through her thin coat. Snow clung to her hair, and the small bundle in her arms barely moved. "Daddy," Lila whispered again, her voice trembling. Her baby is freezing." For a moment, Gabriel said nothing. He looked back at the road ahead, then at the figure again. He told himself there were shelters, charities, people whose job it was to help. He wasn't equipped for this. He was a businessman, not a savior. But Lila's words echoed in his mind, simple and piercing. Her baby is freezing. The light turned green, and Gabriel's foot hovered over the gas pedal. He exhaled sharply, then shifted the car into park. "Stay in your seat, Lila," he said quietly, opening his door. Cold air rushed in as he stepped into the snow. Each step crunched beneath his shoes as he approached the shelter. The woman didn't look up until he was standing a few feet away. Her face was pale, eyes red and tired, lips trembling as she tried to adjust the blanket around the baby. "Ma'am," Gabriel said gently, "are you all right?" She blinked, startled, as if unsure anyone was really speaking to her. I'm fine," she stammered, her voice hoarse. "Please, we're fine. We just need to stay out of the wind." Gabriel crouched slightly, his eyes softening as he saw the baby's tiny hand slip from the blanket, small, bluish at the fingertips. "That baby isn't fine," he said, his tone firm but calm. "How old is your child?" 6 months, she murmured. "Please, I'll be okay. The bus has stopped running. I was going to find somewhere else soon." Gabriel shook his head. "You'll freeze before then." He paused, lowering his voice. "My car is warm. Let me take you somewhere safe. There's a cafe still open down the street. Or—" "No," she said quickly, pulling the baby closer. "I can't. I don't need help." Her words were proud, but her hands trembled too much to adjust the blanket. Gabriel looked at her a moment longer, then unbuttoned his coat and draped it around her shoulders without asking. "You do," he said quietly, "at least until the storm passes." She looked up at him then, her eyes wide and glassy. For the first time, she seemed to really see him, not as another stranger, but as someone whose warmth could pierce through the cold. Gabriel glanced back toward the car. Lila was watching, her little face pressed to the window, anxious and hopeful. He turned back to the woman. "My daughter's in the car," he said softly. "She's worried about your baby. Please, come inside, just until we figure something out." The woman hesitated. Pride flickered in her expression, then crumbled beneath the weight of exhaustion. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Gabriel helped her to her feet and guided her to the car. When Lila saw them, she unbuckled herself and smiled brightly. "Daddy, you brought them," she exclaimed. "Can the baby sit by me?" Gabriel smiled faintly. Let's make sure they're warm first. He opened the back door, and the woman climbed in carefully, still clutching the baby. The heat from the vents washed over them, and she exhaled a shaky sigh of relief. Lila leaned closer, peeking at the bundle. "What's the baby's name?" she asked. The woman hesitated. "Noah," she said softly. "His name is Noah." Lila smiled. "Hi, Noah," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. "You're really little." Gabriel got back into the driver's seat, glancing once more at the mirror. The woman sat stiffly, clearly uneasy, but Lila's innocent curiosity seemed to calm her. "Where can I take you?" Gabriel asked. I don't know," she admitted. "There was a shelter near the east side, but it's full. They turned me away an hour ago." Gabriel frowned. "And you've been outside since then?" She nodded. "I was trying to reach another one, but the buses stopped." He thought for a moment, then sighed. "All right, you'll come home with us. Just for tonight." Her eyes widened. "No, I can't. I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble," Gabriel said firmly. "You need warmth, and your child needs rest. My house is large enough, and we'll figure out what comes next tomorrow." The woman looked down, clearly torn. "You don't even know me," she murmured. Gabriel's gaze softened. "No, but my daughter does. She saw something I might have missed." Lila grinned from the back seat. "I told you, Daddy. We couldn't leave them." The woman finally smiled, a faint, weary curve of her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name's Elena." Gabriel nodded once, starting the engine again. "Elena," he repeated quietly. "All right, let's get you and Noah somewhere warm." The car moved through the falling snow, headlights carving a narrow path through the white night. Lila hummed softly beside Elena, glancing often at the baby, whose tiny breaths now came more evenly. By the time they reached the Ward residence, a large stone house on the edge of the city, the storm had thickened into a full blizzard. Gabriel parked in the sheltered driveway and stepped out first to open the door. Elena followed carefully, clutching Noah close. Her shoes sank into the snow, and when she looked up at the grand house before her, her breath caught. "This is where you live?" she whispered. Gabriel nodded, leading them to the door. "Yes. Come inside. You'll catch your death out here." The warmth inside hit them like a wave. The golden light of the chandeliers spilled across the polished floors, and Lila ran ahead to fetch the thick blanket from the couch. "Here," she said eagerly, handing it to Elena. "You can wrap Noah in this." Elena's eyes glistened. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered, tucking the blanket gently around her baby. Gabriel motioned toward the sofa. "Sit down. I'll get some hot water and something to eat." He disappeared into the kitchen, and the sound of clinking dishes followed. Lila stayed close, watching Elena with quiet fascination. "Are you okay now?" Lila asked softly. Elena nodded. "Yes, thanks to you." "Daddy always helps people," Lila said proudly, "even when he pretends he doesn't want to." Elena smiled faintly. "He's a good man." Lila tilted her head. "He tries to be," she said simply, then added, "You have really pretty hair." The woman laughed softly, a fragile sound, but real. "You're very sweet." When Gabriel returned, he carried a tray with soup, tea, and a bottle of milk. He handed it to her without ceremony. "Eat," he said. "Both of you need your strength." Elena accepted it with trembling hands. "You didn't have to do all this," she murmured. "I know," Gabriel said quietly, "but I wanted to." As she fed her baby, the silence between them softened. Outside, the snow kept falling, muffling the world in white. Inside, warmth spread slowly, not just from the fire, but from something less tangible, something that felt like the first stirrings of hope. The storm deepened through the night, wind brushing against the windows like a whisper. The world outside had vanished into white, but inside Gabriel's home, the quiet hum of heat filled the air. Elena sat on the edge of the couch, cradling Noah, while Lila curled up nearby under a soft blanket, her eyelids growing heavy. Gabriel stood near the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel as he watched the flames dance. The weight of the day began to settle in. The board meetings, the deadlines, the silent drive home that had somehow led to this moment. A stranger and her baby asleep in his living room. It wasn't something he could have predicted, but neither could he regret it. He turned when he heard Elena's voice. "Mr. Ward," she said quietly, careful not to wake Lila. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "There's no need for that. You don't owe me anything." "I do," she said softly. "People walked past us all evening. You stopped. That means something." Gabriel's eyes softened. "Sometimes it just takes someone else to remind us what matters." He glanced toward Lila, now sleeping soundly with her head tilted against the armrest. "She has a way of doing that." Elena followed his gaze and smiled faintly. "She's a beautiful child." "She's my compass," Gabriel said. "Everything I've done since her mother passed, it's been for her." Elena looked down at her baby. "You're lucky to have each other." He nodded, then gestured toward the hallway. "There's a guest room down the hall. It's warm, and the sheets are clean. You should both rest there tonight." "I can stay here," she said quickly. "The couch is fine." "Elena," he interrupted gently. "You and the baby need proper rest. Please, take the room." Her eyes shimmered with gratitude she didn't quite know how to voice. She rose carefully, rocking Noah against her shoulder, and followed Gabriel through the hall. The guest room was softly lit, the quilt on the bed thick and inviting. "I'll bring some extra blankets," he said. "But it should be warm enough." "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." He gave a small nod. "Good night, then. If you need anything, my room is across the hall." When he left, Elena sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the flickering shadows on the wall. The last few days had been a blur of cold and fear. For the first time in weeks, she could feel the tension leave her shoulders. Noah stirred, his tiny hand clutching her finger, and she smiled weakly. "You're safe now," she whispered. "Just for tonight." In the quiet of his own room, Gabriel found it difficult to sleep. The image of Elena huddled under that shelter replayed in his mind. Her trembling hands, the fierce way she'd shielded her baby from the cold. He'd seen desperation before, but something about her had been different. There was dignity in her silence, a strength that didn't match her circumstances. He finally drifted into uneasy sleep, lulled by the sound of the storm outside. When morning came, the world was white and still. Sunlight glimmered faintly off the snow-covered trees. Gabriel woke early, out of habit, and went to check on the guests. He paused at the guest room door, knocking softly. Elena opened it a crack, her eyes still tired but her expression lighter. "Good morning," she said. "I didn't expect to sleep that well." Gabriel smiled. "I'm glad you did." "Lila's in the kitchen. She insisted on making pancakes." Elena blinked in surprise. "Oh, I can help." "You'll eat first," he said firmly. "Then we'll talk about what comes next." She hesitated but nodded, following him to the kitchen. The smell of butter and syrup filled the air, and Lila was standing on a small stool, flipping pancakes with serious concentration. She looked up when she saw them. "Good morning," she chirped. "I made extra for you and Noah." Elena couldn't help but smile. "That's very kind of you." Lila beamed. "Daddy says good people share what they have." Gabriel arched a brow. "Did I say that?" "You should," Lila said simply, making both adults laugh. Breakfast was quiet but warm. Elena fed Noah small bits of mashed fruit, while Lila chatted about school, snowball fights, and her upcoming piano recital. Gabriel watched them, a strange calm settling over him. It had been a long time since laughter sounded so natural in his kitchen. After the dishes were cleared, Gabriel leaned against the counter. "Elena, what are your plans now? Do you have anyone you can stay with?" She shook her head. "No family nearby. My parents passed a few years ago. I had a small apartment, but after Noah got sick, I lost my job. I fell behind on rent." Her voice faltered, but she caught herself. "I've been looking for work, but no one wants to hire someone who has to care for a baby." Gabriel was silent for a moment. He'd heard similar stories before. He'd even signed off on charitable donations meant to help people in her situation. But seeing it up close was different. Numbers on paper didn't show the exhaustion in her eyes. "What kind of work did you do?" he asked. "I was studying nursing before I had Noah," she said. "After he was born, I worked part-time at a clinic until—" She trailed off, then shook her head. "Until it became impossible." Gabriel nodded slowly. "There's a position open at my company's community foundation. Administrative work, flexible hours. It's not much, but it's something." She stared at him. "You're offering me a job?" You need a chance to get back on your feet, he said. And I trust my instincts. You're not the kind of person to waste one. Elena blinked rapidly, emotion flickering across her face. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Lila piped up, swinging her legs from her chair. Then you and Noah can stay here until you find your own house. Gabriel gave his daughter a look, half stern, half amused. Lila, what? She asked innocently. You said helping people is good. Elena laughed softly, though tears shimmered in her eyes. You have a very persuasive daughter, Mr. Ward. Call me Gabriel, he said gently. And yes, Lila tends to get her way. The rest of the morning passed easily. Gabriel showed Elena where to find spare clothes from his late wife's storage, assuring her she could use anything she needed. She hesitated, but the clean fabric and warmth were too inviting to refuse. By afternoon, Lila had convinced her to join them for lunch, and soon the sound of laughter returned to the house. That night, after Lila was asleep, Gabriel found himself in the study, staring out at the quiet snowfall. He heard soft footsteps behind him and turned to see Elena standing by the doorway, wrapped in a borrowed sweater. I wanted to thank you again, she said quietly. For everything. I know you didn't have to. Gabriel turned back to the window. You don't have to keep thanking me. It's nice having life in this house again. Elena stepped closer. You miss her, don't you? Lila's mother. He nodded once. Every day. I'm sorry, she whispered. He looked at her, his eyes steady. Don't be. She'd have wanted me to help someone who needed it. That was who she was. Elena smiled faintly. Then she must have been wonderful. She was, he said simply. But I think Lila gets her heart from her. They stood in silence for a moment, the firelight flickering across the room. Outside, the snow had softened to a gentle fall. For the first time in years, Gabriel felt the weight in his chest ease, not disappear, but shift into something lighter. Good night, Gabriel, Elena said softly. Good night, Elena. When she was gone, he stayed by the window, listening to the faint sound of Noah's breathing down the hall. It was strange how quickly the presence of two strangers had filled the emptiness he'd stopped noticing. Maybe, he thought, it wasn't strange at all. Maybe it was exactly what was meant to happen. The next few days unfolded like a slow thaw after a long freeze. The blizzard passed, leaving behind silver trees and streets piled with snowbanks. Inside Gabriel Ward's house, the fire rarely went out, the scent of cocoa and cinnamon often drifting through the rooms. Elena awoke each morning to the muffled sound of Lila's laughter echoing down the hall. It startled her at first, the idea of waking to warmth, to the quiet hum of a household instead of the rush of cold air through broken windows. For so long, she had measured mornings by how heavy the wind felt against her skin. Now, she measured them by the sound of a child's voice. Lila quickly claimed Noah as her new mission in life. She sat beside Elena every morning while the baby kicked his blanket and gurgled at her bright, animated face. Look, Daddy, she called once as Gabriel passed through the kitchen, coffee cup in hand. He smiled at me. See, Gabriel leaned against the doorway, watching the two of them. You're a natural, Lila. I think he likes me best, she said solemnly. Elena laughed softly. He likes anyone who makes silly faces at him. That means me, Lila said with a grin, and the room filled with easy laughter again. Later, when Noah napped and Lila busied herself with her coloring books, Gabriel and Elena would find themselves sharing the same quiet space in the living room. Sometimes she folded laundry while he read emails on his tablet. Sometimes neither spoke at all. Yet there was comfort in the silence, a kind of wordless understanding. By the fourth morning, Gabriel drove them to the community foundation he had mentioned. The building was bright, modern, and full of movement. Elena sat in the passenger seat, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I haven't worked in so long, she murmured. You'll remember quickly, Gabriel said. It's a small team. Good people. You'll fit in. When they arrived, he introduced her to the foundation's director, a warm woman named Mrs. Hayes. Within an hour, Elena had a desk, a stack of orientation papers, and a tentative schedule. She looked both relieved and overwhelmed. On the drive home, she stared out at the city. It feels strange, she said softly, to have somewhere to go again, to feel useful. Gabriel glanced at her. You never stopped being useful. You just needed someone to see it. She smiled faintly. You and Lila saw more than you should have. He didn't answer that. He only drove, eyes steady on the road, the smallest of smiles curving his lips. That evening, the three of them, and little Noah, sat around the dining table. Lila insisted on setting out extra napkins in case of accidents. Gabriel watched Elena guide Noah's tiny spoon while Lila talked endlessly about school. Daddy, Elena said she used to play the piano, Lila announced suddenly. Can she play ours? Gabriel blinked. The grand piano in the sitting room had belonged to his late wife. He hadn't touched it since the funeral. For a heartbeat, the old ache surfaced. Then he looked at Elena's hopeful eyes and Lila's eager grin. If she wants to, he said quietly. Elena hesitated. I haven't played in a long time. Please, Lila begged. Just one song. After dinner, she gave in. She settled at the piano bench, fingers hovering above the keys as if greeting old friends. The first notes were soft, hesitant, but soon the melody took shape, a gentle lullaby that seemed to melt the walls around them. Gabriel closed his eyes, hearing the echo of his wife's laughter in the same room years ago. But instead of pain, there was peace. When the last note faded, Lila clapped, and even Noah cooed as if applauding too. That was beautiful, Gabriel said quietly. Elena smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I used to play for my mother when she couldn't sleep. I forgot how much I missed it. Maybe you could teach Lila sometime, he offered. Lila's eyes lit up. Really? If Elena agrees, Gabriel said. I'd love to, Elena replied, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, perhaps, or the first hint of trust turning into belonging. Days became a rhythm. Elena began work officially, leaving Noah with a kindly neighbor when Lila was at school. Each evening she returned to the Ward's house, sometimes to stay for dinner, sometimes just to share tea. The arrangement felt natural, almost inevitable. One Saturday morning, Gabriel found Lila in the living room stacking blocks for Noah, who was now sitting up, eyes bright. Daddy, we're building a castle, she announced. Elena says every baby prince needs one. Gabriel smiled. Then we'll make sure it has strong walls. Elena looked up from the couch, where she was sewing a tear in her coat. You'd be surprised how quickly walls fall when someone laughs hard enough, she said lightly. He met her eyes and chuckled. You've been talking to Lila too much. Maybe she's rubbing off on me. Later that afternoon, as snow began to fall again, Gabriel suggested a walk. They bundled up and ventured outside. Lila skipped ahead, dragging a small sled behind her. The world glittered white and silent except for their laughter. At the park, Lila built a snowman while Gabriel and Elena watched from a bench. She shaped the tiny snow arms carefully, humming the same tune Elena had played days before. She reminds me of hope, Elena said quietly. She reminds me of her mother, Gabriel replied. Fearless, but kind. Elena hesitated. It must be hard, balancing what you lost with what you still have. He nodded. It was. For a long time, I thought closing myself off was the only way to survive. Then one night a little voice in the back seat wouldn't let me drive away. Elena smiled. I owe that little voice everything. When they returned home, Lila was exhausted. Gabriel tucked her into bed while Elena settled Noah in the guest room crib. As the house quieted, they met again in the hallway, both reluctant to say goodnight. Thank you, Elena said softly, for letting us stay this long. I'll start looking for a place soon. There's no rush, Gabriel replied. It's nice having you here. She looked down, fingers twisting in her sleeves. You don't have to be kind out of pity. It's not pity, he said simply. It's choice. Something in his voice made her throat tighten. Then I'm grateful for it. He smiled faintly. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another busy day. As she turned to go, he added quietly, and Elena, welcome home. She stopped, stunned, then looked back at him. The warmth in his eyes told her he meant it. That night, Elena stood by the window of her room, watching the snow drift down. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was on the outside of life looking in. Somewhere between the sound of Lila's laughter and Gabriel's quiet strength, she had found a place to breathe again. And in that small, golden-lit house, The cold world outside no longer felt quite so vast. The following week settled into a gentle rhythm that none of them had expected. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, turning the kitchen gold while Lila chattered about her upcoming school art fair. Noah sat in a carrier beside her chair, reaching for her crayons with tiny hands. Elena prepared breakfast while Gabriel read the news, though more often than not his eyes drifted from the screen to the small domestic scene around him. He had forgotten what a home sounded like: quiet conversation, laughter, the clink of plates. For years, his mornings had been filled only with emails and the low hum of the coffee maker. Now, he found himself lingering at the table long after his usual schedule demanded he leave. "You'll be late, Daddy," Lila warned one morning, frowning at him with exaggerated seriousness. Gabriel smiled. "You sound like my assistant. I just don't want you to miss the important business things," she said, mimicking air quotes. "But you still have to eat your toast." Elena laughed softly. "She's right, you know." He looked at the two of them and nodded. "All right, I surrender." When he left for work, the house still felt warm in his mind. At the office, he caught himself checking his phone between meetings, looking for photos Lila might send. Usually blurry ones of Noah's latest discoveries or of pancakes, almost shaped like hearts. His colleagues noticed the change. The hard edge in his voice had softened, and even his secretary remarked that he smiled more often. Elena adjusted to her new job at the foundation quickly. She organized donations, helped families apply for assistance, and found herself thriving in the structured kindness of the place. Mrs. Hayes praised her efficiency, and before long, she was given more responsibility. Each evening, she walked up the steps of Gabriel's home feeling tired but content. She had somewhere to return to, someone waiting to ask, "How was your day?" It was a feeling she hadn't realized she'd missed. One evening, after a particularly long day at the foundation, she arrived to find Lila waiting at the door, bouncing with excitement. "Daddy said we're decorating for winter," Lila announced. "There's cocoa and lights and everything." True enough, the living room was full of boxes, silver ribbons, pine cones, and the soft scent of cinnamon candles. Gabriel was untangling a string of lights, pretending not to notice Lila's amused giggles at his efforts. "You're home," he said, straightening as Elena entered. "We thought we'd surprise you." Elena blinked at the warm chaos. "It's beautiful. Wait until you see it finished," Lila said. "You can help with the tree." Together they decorated for hours. Lila hung ornaments far too close together. Gabriel adjusted them quietly when she wasn't looking. Elena stood on a small stool to place a star at the top, and when she swayed, Gabriel steadied her without thinking. Their hands brushed, brief, accidental, but it lingered between them like a spark neither wanted to acknowledge aloud. When the last light flickered on, Lila clapped. The tree glowed against the window, reflections dancing in the glass. "It's perfect," she declared. Gabriel looked at her, then at Elena, and nodded. "It is." After Lila went to bed, the house dimmed to soft lamplight. Elena lingered in the living room, gazing at the tree. Gabriel returned from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of cocoa. "You'll need this," he said, offering one. She smiled, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. "You really didn't have to let us stay this long." "It's only been a few weeks," he replied. "The house feels less empty with you here." Elena hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I keep worrying it's all temporary, that one morning I'll wake up, and it'll be back to just the road and the cold." He studied her for a moment. "It won't be. Not if I can help it." The fire cracked softly in the hearth. Outside, snow fell in slow, steady flakes, brushing against the windows like quiet music. "Lila's changed, you know," Elena said after a while. "She used to talk about her mother every night. Now she talks about the future, about teaching Noah how to paint, about playing duets on the piano. You gave her hope." Gabriel shook his head. "She found it herself. I just followed her lead." Elena smiled, lowering her gaze. "She reminds me of the kind of person I wanted to be before everything fell apart." "You're still that person," he said. "You just had to walk through a storm to find your footing again." The words settled between them like the glow from the fire, gentle, honest, and far warmer than the air. A week later came Lila's piano recital. She had begged Elena to help her prepare, and every evening the house filled with uneven notes, laughter, and patient correction. On the day of the performance, Gabriel sat in the small auditorium, his hands clasped tightly as Lila took the stage. She wore a light blue dress and a nervous smile. When her fingers touched the keys, the melody wobbled once, then steadied. Elena's lullaby, the same tune she had played on that first evening. Gabriel's throat tightened. Elena sat beside him, whispering encouragement under her breath. When the final note rang out, the applause that followed felt like sunlight after winter. Back at home, Lila ran into Elena's arms. "We did it," she cried. "You were wonderful," Elena said, laughing. Noah even clapped. Gabriel rested a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Lila looked up at him, grinning. "Can we have hot chocolate to celebrate?" "Hot chocolate for everyone," Gabriel said. That night, as the three of them and the baby sat around the fire again, Lila curled against her father, half asleep. Noah babbled softly in Elena's arms. The air was filled with the faint sound of wind outside and the steady crackle of the flames. "Do you ever think about what happens next?" Elena asked quietly. Gabriel looked at her over Lila's sleeping head. "All the time." "And," she prompted. "And I think," he said slowly, "that sometimes the next chapter isn't about plans or meetings. Sometimes it's just about the people who walk into your life when you least expect it." Elena smiled, eyes glistening. "Then I'm glad we crossed paths." "So am I," he said. They sat together until the fire burned low, unwilling to break the quiet peace that had settled over the house. For the first time in years, Gabriel felt the season's chill fade before it even reached his heart. The new year arrived quietly, blanketed in snow. The world outside Gabriel Ward's house shimmered white and still, as if pausing to breathe before beginning again. Inside, warmth lingered, fires crackled, laughter came easily, and for a while it seemed the rhythm they'd built could last forever. Elena had found a steady pace between her work at the foundation and life at the Ward's home. Lila continued her lessons. Noah began crawling with determined curiosity, and Gabriel looked forward to coming home each night. But life, Elena often reminded herself, had a way of testing even the calmest waters. It started with a letter. She found it one morning slipped beneath the front door, a plain white envelope with her name written in careful, unfamiliar script. She turned it over in her hands, her stomach tightening. There was no return address, only a smudge of ink where someone had hastily blotted their pen. When she opened it, a single page fluttered out. "Elena, we've been trying to reach you for months. There are still unresolved matters concerning your late husband's estate. Please contact us as soon as possible to discuss the outstanding debts and documentation. If you cannot, legal steps may be taken to recover what remains owed. Harper and Finch Law Associates." Her hands trembled. The words blurred. She had tried so hard to leave that chapter behind. The hospital bills, the apartment rent, the weight of responsibility she could never meet after her husband's sudden death. Now, the past had found her. She folded the letter quickly as Lila's footsteps echoed down the stairs. "Morning," the girl chirped, hair in wild curls. "Daddy says it's pancake day." Elena forced a smile. "Then we'd better not be late." She tucked the letter into her coat pocket and tried to steady her breathing. At breakfast, Gabriel noticed the quiet crease between her brows. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she said quickly, but her voice was thinner than usual. "Just tired." He didn't press. Yet throughout the morning, he found his gaze drifting toward her, noting the way her smile faltered when she thought no one was looking. Days passed, and though Elena tried to hide it, the weight of that envelope followed her. She worked longer hours at the foundation, trying to lose herself in helping others, but the anxiety shadowed even her laughter. One evening, Gabriel came home early and found her sitting by the piano, the letter in her hands. She didn't hear him enter. "Elena," he said softly. She startled, shoving the paper behind her. "Gabriel, I didn't know you were back." He stepped closer. "You've been somewhere else these past few days. What's going on?" She hesitated. "It's nothing you need to worry about. Try me." Something in his tone, gentle but firm, broke through her guard. She exhaled and handed him the letter. As he read, his expression tightened. How much are we talking about? I don't know, she said quietly. When my husband died, there were debts. I thought I mean it, he said quietly. When Lila found you that night, she didn't just see someone to help. She saw someone who belonged here. And so did I. Elena's composure cracked. You can't fix everything, Gabriel. I know, he said, but I can stand beside you while you face it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed them away gently. That night, after Lila was asleep, they sat together by the fire, discussing possibilities, payment plans, legal aid, even anonymous donations through the foundation. It wasn't easy, but somehow, sharing the weight made it feel bearable. As the days went on, Elena began to see the truth in Gabriel's words. She wasn't alone anymore. The debts were real, the struggle daunting, but she had something she hadn't before, people who cared. Still, the strain showed. One afternoon, Lila came home from school upset. Some kids said mean things, she said tearfully. They said Noah and Miss Elena shouldn't live with us because they're not really family. Gabriel knelt beside her. What did you say? I told them they don't know anything about family, Lila said fiercely. But it still hurt. Elena's heart twisted. She hugged Lila close. You did the right thing, sweetheart. People don't always understand what love looks like. Gabriel looked over Lila's shoulder at Elena. We know, and that's what matters. That evening, Lila drew a picture. 4 figures holding hands under a blue sky, a small baby in the middle. She labeled them carefully, Daddy, Lila, Elena, Noah. When she showed it to them, the room went quiet. It's us, Lila explained proudly. Our family. Elena blinked back tears. Gabriel smiled and placed the picture on the mantel. It remained there all winter. Yet the world outside wasn't done testing them. Gabriel's company began facing troubles. A merger gone wrong, investors pulling out. Long nights returned, phone calls that bled into dawn. He grew more withdrawn, his usual calm shadowed by worry. Elena noticed. She brought him tea he forgot to drink, reminded him to rest, helped Lila with homework when he couldn't. The balance between them shifted subtly. She had once been the one rescued. Now she was the one holding things together. One late night, she found him still in his study, staring at spreadsheets. The lamplight painted weary shadows across his face. Any progress? She asked gently. He sighed. Not enough. If this deal collapses, I'll have to let people go. Families will be affected. You always think of everyone else first, she said softly. He looked up. It's what keeps me up at night. Then maybe you should let someone else worry for a change. He smiled faintly. You volunteering? I already have, she said. You just didn't notice. Their eyes met, the air between them quiet and charged, not with romance, but with the kind of trust that only hardship can build. The next morning, the storm outside mirrored the one within. Thick snow blanketed the roads, trapping them indoors. Lila took the opportunity to declare a snow day celebration, and soon the house was filled with the smell of cookies and the sound of giggles. For a while, the laughter pushed away all other worries. Gabriel tried to relax, sitting by the fire with a book, but the numbers from his reports kept running through his mind. The company's future balanced on a knife's edge, and he knew one wrong move could send it spiraling. Elena noticed the distant look in his eyes. Come help us decorate the cookies, she said, holding out a tray covered in frosting and colored sugar. Doctor's orders. He hesitated. I don't think I'm qualified for that kind of surgery. You'll learn quickly, she said, and there was something in her tone, gentle but firm, that made him set the book aside. Lila squealed with delight when he joined them. Daddy's going to make a snowman cookie. I think it's turning into a snow blob, he said dryly, holding up his lopsided creation. Lila laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Elena smiled as she watched them. For a few precious moments, the house felt untouched by the troubles outside, just warmth, light, and the sound of belonging. Later that evening, when Lila and Noah were asleep, Gabriel found Elena in the living room folding laundry. The firelight glowed on her hair, catching soft gold strands among the dark. I've been thinking, he said, stepping closer, about what you said last night. that maybe I should let someone else worry for a while. She looked up, curious. And, and I realized I don't know how to do that. Not since my wife passed. Elena's hand stilled. You've been carrying everything alone for a long time. So have you. They shared a long, quiet look. Two people who had learned the same language of loss and resilience. I don't have all the answers, she said softly. But maybe we don't need them right now. Maybe it's enough to take things one step at a time. He nodded slowly. One step at a time. Over the next week, they did just that. The company crisis continued, but Gabriel found himself facing it with renewed strength. Elena's steady presence anchored him in ways he hadn't expected. Some nights, she stayed up helping him sort through reports. Others, she coaxed him away from the desk to share tea by the fire. When the tension became too much, Lila's laughter or Noah's tiny babbles seemed to break through the clouds. The rhythm of their home, imperfect, real, became the thing that carried them through. One particularly cold night, the power flickered and went out entirely. Darkness swept through the house. Lila gasped, clutching her stuffed bear. "It's okay, sweetheart," Gabriel said, reaching for a flashlight. "Just the storm." Elena moved quickly, gathering blankets. "We'll make it an adventure." A campout by the fire. They built a small nest of quilts and pillows in the living room, lighting a few candles. The shadows danced across the walls, and soon the fear melted away, replaced by cozy laughter. "Tell us a story," Lila whispered as snow pressed against the windows. Elena smiled. "Once upon a time, there was a little girl who saw someone freezing in the snow. She told her father, 'Daddy, her baby is freezing.'" Lila grinned. "That's me. That's you," Elena said. "And because of that, something amazing happened. The world became a little warmer." Gabriel watched them, his heart tightening with quiet gratitude. In that dim light, surrounded by laughter, he saw not just the people he'd taken in, but the family he hadn't known he was missing. They fell asleep there, the four of them, wrapped in blankets, the storm raging harmlessly outside. By morning, the world beyond the windows glittered under sunlight, as if washed clean. That day brought unexpected news. Gabriel's business partner called to say that a new investor had stepped in at the last minute. The deal was saved. Relief washed over him so suddenly he had to sit down. When he told Elena, she smiled. "Looks like the storm passed." "Because of you," he said. "You kept me steady." She shook her head. "Because of all of us. Because we didn't give up." Gabriel looked at her for a long time. "Elena, He stopped. The words caught somewhere between gratitude and something deeper. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," she said gently. "You gave me a home when I had nothing." They stood there for a moment, sunlight spilling through the windows, the sound of Lila and Noah playing in the background. The world outside was still cold, but inside it felt like spring might not be so far away. That night, Lila came running into the living room with a folded piece of paper. "Daddy, Miss Elena, look, it was a flyer from school, Family Day celebration. Bring someone who makes your family complete." Lila beamed. "I want us all to go. All four of us." Elena's breath caught. Gabriel smiled softly. "Then we'll be there." As she watched him scoop Lila into his arms, Elena realized something quietly profound. The family she'd thought she lost had been replaced by something new. Not the same, but perhaps even stronger. It wasn't about blood or names or shared pasts. It was about showing up, again and again, when it mattered. That evening, after the children were asleep, Gabriel stood at the window. Snow fell in slow spirals, the city lights glowing through it. Elena joined him silently, their shoulders almost touching. "Do you ever think," he murmured, "about how strange it is, the way one small moment can change everything?" "All the time," she said. "One look, one word, one act of kindness." He turned toward her. "And now," she said softly, "I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be." They stood in silence, the snow falling beyond the glass, until the fire burned low and the last shadows faded. The cold outside pressed against the world, but inside that little house, warmth had found a home. The day of Lila's school family day dawned crisp and clear. A rare break in the winter clouds let sunlight spill across the snow, making it sparkle like glass. Inside the ward house, the morning was a cheerful storm of activity. Lila hopping from room to room in excitement, Noah babbling from his high chair, and Gabriel trying, mostly in vain, to keep everything organized. "Elena, have you seen Lila's mittens?" he called from the entryway. "She's wearing them," Elena said, laughing as she helped Noah into his tiny winter coat. "She put them on an hour ago just in case you forgot." "I didn't forget," Lila said solemnly, showing off the bright red gloves. "These are my lucky mittens." "Then we'll definitely have a good day," Gabriel said, straightening her scarf. The school gym was already buzzing when they arrived. Paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling, long tables covered in construction paper hearts, and the air filled with chatter. Parents milled about, children darted between tables, and the smell of cocoa drifted from a nearby snack stand. Lila tugged Elena's hand. "Come on, my class is over here." Gabriel watched them go, Lila's bright laughter cutting through the noise. For a moment, he felt something unfamiliar, a sense of pride that had little to do with business or achievement. This, he thought, was what mattered. When he joined them, Lila was showing off her artwork display, a poster of her family drawn in crayon, the same four figures she'd drawn weeks ago. Above it, she'd written carefully in block letters, "My family. Me, Daddy, Miss Elena, and baby Noah." Other parents glanced curiously, some smiling, a few whispering. Gabriel felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the awareness of eyes and assumptions. But before he could speak, Lila said brightly, "Miss Elena helps me practice piano, and Daddy makes pancakes. We're a team." The teacher smiled warmly. "That sounds like a wonderful family, Lila." "It is," she said simply. Elena looked down, moved by the certainty in the little girl's voice. She caught Gabriel's gaze. The pride in his eyes steadied her. For once, she didn't feel like an outsider. The day unfolded in laughter and small joys. There were games, songs, and a short performance where Lila played a few bars of her favorite tune on a tiny keyboard, while Gabriel clapped the loudest. When it ended, the four of them stood together at the edge of the crowd, cheeks pink from the cold. "Thank you for coming," Lila said, slipping her gloved hand into Elena's. "It was perfect." "It was," Gabriel agreed, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You did great." Elena smiled at both of them. "We should celebrate." "Hot chocolate," Lila suggested immediately. "Of course," Gabriel said. They walked down the snowy street toward a small cafe near the school. The windows glowed amber, fogged with steam from inside. When they entered, warmth wrapped around them like a soft blanket. They found a corner table, and soon mugs of cocoa and small pastries appeared, filling the air with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. For a long time, they simply talked about Lila's friends, about the music she wanted to learn next, about how Noah had tried to grab a snowflake and ended up laughing when it melted on his hand. It was simple, ordinary, and somehow extraordinary in its peace. But as they walked home, Elena noticed the familiar man standing by the gate, a courier in a navy coat, holding an envelope. Her heart sank. "Ms. Elena Marin?" he asked. "Yes," she said, already knowing what it was. She signed the clipboard and took the envelope, her fingers cold even through her gloves. Gabriel watched her expression change. "Another letter?" She nodded, tucking it into her bag. "I'll look at it later." Back inside, Lila ran off to show Gabriel her prize from the fair, leaving Elena alone for a moment. She opened the letter quietly at the kitchen table. "Dear Ms. Marin, following our previous correspondence, we regret to inform you that the remaining balance must be addressed within 60 days to avoid court collection proceedings. Please contact our office to discuss settlement options." Her vision blurred again, just like before. She had been making payments, small, steady ones, but apparently they weren't enough. She pressed her hand to her forehead, the familiar panic creeping in. Gabriel entered then, his voice low. "It's from them again, isn't it?" She nodded. "They want more than I can give." He sat down across from her. "Let me help." "Gabriel, this isn't charity," he said. "It's what family does." She shook her head. "You've already done too much. You gave us a roof, food, safety. I can't keep taking." "You're not taking," he said firmly. "You're sharing a burden. The difference matters." For a moment, she couldn't speak. The gratitude and shame tangled too tightly. I just don't want to be someone you have to save again. He leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. Then don't be. Stand beside me instead. Let's figure it out together. The quiet stretched between them, filled with the soft crackle of the fireplace. Finally, she nodded. Together. That evening, after Lila and Noah were asleep, they worked through the papers, spreadsheets, letters, receipts. It took hours, but by midnight they had a plan. Gabriel would contact his company's legal team for advice on negotiating the debt, and Elena would continue her payments under their guidance. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something. When they finally set the papers aside, Elena rubbed her eyes. You really didn't have to spend your evening doing this. Gabriel smiled faintly. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. The simplicity of the words made her heart tighten. She looked at him, at the exhaustion in his face softened by kindness, and wondered when exactly he had become the center of her calm. Winter stretched on, but the air inside the house felt lighter. Lila practiced her songs. Noah learned to stand, wobbling proudly before tumbling into Elena's waiting arms. Gabriel managed to steady his company after weeks of negotiation, and his late nights grew fewer. One Sunday morning, Lila burst into their room carrying a handful of paper hearts she'd cut out herself. It's Valentine's week, she declared. We have to decorate everything. Gabriel laughed. Everything, everything, she said, spreading the hearts across the table. That's what love looks like. Elena glanced at Gabriel, smiling. Hard to argue with that. They spent the morning hanging paper hearts on windows and doors. Lila insisted on writing messages on them. Thank you, Miss Elena. Best Daddy. Noah's first Valentine. By the time they finished, the house looked like a celebration of small joys. That night, after Lila was asleep, Gabriel found one last heart on the table. In careful handwriting, it read, Thank you for finding us. He looked toward the stairs where Elena had gone to settle Noah and felt a quiet warmth spread through him. Maybe it wasn't he who had found them, he thought. Maybe they had found each other. But the peace didn't last long. A few days later, as the snow began to melt into muddy slush, Gabriel received a call that froze him in place. It was from his company's legal department. Someone had leaked details of their internal financial recovery plan to the press, information that could damage their reputation and undo months of work. He listened in silence, the words echoing through his office like cold wind. When he hung up, he stared out the window for a long time. Then he called Elena. Her voice was calm but worried. What happened? Someone leaked confidential documents. I don't know who, but it could ruin everything. Is there anything I can do? He hesitated. Just keep things steady at home. I don't want Lila to worry. I will, she promised. When she hung up, she stood by the window holding Noah, watching the snow melt into the earth. She knew how much the company meant to Gabriel, not for pride, but for the people who depended on him. He had rebuilt her life with steady hands. Now, she wished she could do the same for him. Elena spent that evening thinking. When Gabriel came home late, exhaustion written in every line of his face, she met him at the door with coffee and quiet steadiness. They've narrowed it down, he said, sinking into a chair. It's someone inside the finance division. But until we prove it, the damage control falls on me. She placed a hand on his arm. You'll fix it. You always do. He gave a tired smile. Not this time alone. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings. Gabriel was gone from dawn until well after midnight. The light in his study stayed on most nights, casting long shadows across the hallway. Lila would tiptoe to the doorway, whispering, Daddy's working hard, before Elena guided her back to bed. By the fourth day, Gabriel looked pale and hollow-eyed. He tried to hide it, but fatigue clung to him like frost. That evening, Elena brought him dinner at his desk, a simple bowl of soup and bread. He was surrounded by stacks of files and glowing monitors. You can't keep this pace, she said softly. He rubbed his temples. If I stop, I'll lose the company. You'll lose yourself first. Her words hung in the air. He looked up, startled by the quiet force behind them. She set the tray down and folded her arms. You told me not to carry everything alone. That goes both ways. He exhaled slowly, the tension easing just a little. I don't even know where to start anymore. Start by sleeping, she said gently. Then we'll find a way in the morning. He hesitated, then nodded. All right, just for a few hours. When he finally closed his laptop, she switched off the lamp, leaving only the soft glow from the hallway. She pulled a blanket over his shoulders as he leaned back in the chair, already half asleep. For the first time in days, his expression was peaceful. Elena watched him a moment longer, then quietly turned to the desk. Papers lay scattered, reports, names, coded emails. One stood out, a list of employees with access to the leaked files. She didn't mean to pry, but a name caught her eye, someone she recognized from Gabriel's stories, a long-trusted executive who had recently seemed distant. The next morning, she mentioned it casually over breakfast. Didn't you say your head of operations, Mr. Blake, has been avoiding meetings? Gabriel frowned. You remember that? He seemed evasive from how you described him. Gabriel's expression shifted. Blake handled the original contracts. He would have access. He left for the office early, a spark of direction returning to his stride. That evening, he called from his car, voice steadier than it had been all week. You were right. It was Blake. He sold data to a competitor for a quick payout. We've got proof now. Elena's relief was palpable. So it's over? Almost. I still have to manage the fallout, but at least we know where it came from. When he arrived home that night, Lila ran to greet him, nearly knocking over her cocoa. Daddy, you look happy again. He laughed, scooping her up. I think we're finally turning a corner. Elena smiled from the kitchen doorway. Told you we'd find a way. Gabriel looked at her, gratitude shining through fatigue. I don't think I could have done it without you. Over the next week, things slowly returned to normal. The company issued a statement, investors calmed, and the storm that had threatened to undo everything began to fade. Gabriel took a few days off for the first time in months. One morning, they decided to take the children sledding at a nearby park. The sun was bright, the snow soft beneath their boots. Lila raced ahead with her sled, shouting instructions over her shoulder. Daddy, you push first. Then Miss Elena and Noah can go. Gabriel grinned. You're the boss, apparently. They took turns sledding down the small hill, laughter echoing through the crisp air. Even Noah giggled as the wind brushed his cheeks. For a few hours, they forgot about everything else, the debts, the company, the past. As the sun began to sink, they built a small snowman together. Lila insisted on giving it Gabriel's scarf. It looks like you, Daddy. Gabriel feigned offense. I hope I look a little better than that snowman. Elena chuckled. The resemblance is uncanny. When they finally headed home, Lila fell asleep in the car, her hand resting against Noah's mittened one. The backseat was quiet except for their soft breathing. Gabriel glanced at Elena. You ever think about what happens next? She turned toward him, thoughtful. Every day, but I'm learning not to worry about it so much. Just to be here. He nodded, eyes on the road. Here's not so bad. That evening, after carrying the children to bed, they lingered in the quiet living room. The fire burned low, the soft hum of the heater filling the space. Gabriel, she said quietly, when I first met you, I was sure it was just temporary, that you were helping out of kindness, and one day I'd have to leave. He looked up, waiting. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like someone else's home. It started feeling like ours. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Gabriel said, simply, that's exactly how it should be. Outside, snow began to fall again, thin and silent. Inside, the warmth felt permanent now, like something earned rather than borrowed. 3 months later, winter had begun to loosen its grip. The snow still clung stubbornly to the corners of the streets, but the sun lingered longer each day, and the air carried the faint promise of spring. Inside the Ward household, mornings followed a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Lila's laughter echoed from the living room as she helped Noah stack wooden blocks, and Gabriel read the business headlines with a calm he hadn't known in years. Elena moved easily among them now. She had taken a position at Gabriel's company, part-time at first, assisting in community outreach programs. Her organization and warmth quickly caught attention, and soon she was helping lead a new initiative that provided job training and resources for struggling families. The work felt personal. Every file she handled reminded her of how close she had come to losing everything. One morning, Gabriel looked up from his tablet as she set a stack of folders on the counter. "You're in early mode again," he said with a smile. "Big presentation?" "Just updates for the outreach project," she replied. "We're rolling out a new housing partnership next month. It's strange, you know. I used to stand in line at one of those shelters. Now I'm helping run the program." "That's not strange," he said. "That's what growth looks like." She met his eyes and saw the quiet pride there. It steadied her more than she could say. Lila burst into the kitchen wearing a glittery headband. "Miss Elena, Daddy says we can plant flowers when the snow melts. I want pink ones and purple ones and maybe blue. Do flowers come in blue?" "Some do," Elena said, crouching down. "But they need sunshine, so we'll have to wait a bit longer." Lila sighed dramatically. "Winter takes forever." Gabriel laughed. "Says the girl who built 6 snowmen last week." As the days grew lighter, the household blossomed with the change of season. Gabriel's company, once hanging by a thread, was thriving again under steadier leadership. Investors praised his resilience, though he quietly credited Elena's insight more than once. She had a way of seeing what others overlooked, not just in spreadsheets, but in people. One afternoon, as she sorted paperwork at her desk, she noticed a file labeled Employee Assistance Program, Deferred Cases. She flipped through the pages, recognizing names of staff who had fallen behind on payments or struggled through illness. The forms were cold, bureaucratic, but to her, they were stories. That evening, she brought the file to Gabriel. "We could do better here," she said. "We have resources, mentorship, emergency funds, job coaching. What if we used them properly?" He leaned back, listening. "You want to expand the support system?" "Yes. Make it real, not just something that exists on paper." He studied her for a long moment. "Then do it." Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I trust you," he said simply. And she did it. Over the next few weeks, Elena poured herself into the project. She met with staff, redesigned the structure, and worked late crafting proposals. Word spread quickly about the CEO's new initiative and the woman behind it whose compassion was changing company culture from the inside out. One evening, she came home exhausted but glowing. Gabriel noticed the sparkle in her eyes as she kicked off her shoes. "Good day," he asked. "The best," she said. "We got approval for the family housing extension. You know what that means. More people will have a real chance." He smiled, pouring her tea. "You're building something that'll outlast all of us." She sipped quietly. "That's the goal." Lila came skipping into the room, holding a crayon drawing. "Look, it's us," she announced. The picture showed 4 figures beneath the sun, Lila with a giant smile, Gabriel holding her hand, Elena beside him, and Noah perched on her hip. Above them, in bright pink letters, she'd written home. Elena stared at it for a long time. Something about the simplicity of the word made her throat tighten. Gabriel looked too, then said softly, "She got it right." Spring arrived at last. The snow melted, leaving behind damp earth and green shoots that reached for the sun. On weekends, they worked together in the small garden behind the house. Lila planted her pink and purple flowers while Noah toddled around clutching a plastic spade. One morning, while helping Lila dig a hole, Gabriel noticed Elena standing by the fence, her eyes closed, face tilted toward the light. He walked over quietly. "Feels different, doesn't it?" "The air," she said, smiling. "It smells like new beginnings." He nodded. "You've given this house that feeling." She shook her head. "We all did." By late afternoon, they were muddy, tired, and happy. Lila's flowers stood in neat rows, and even Noah had managed to bury a handful of pebbles with great satisfaction. Inside, as Gabriel cleaned up the kitchen, Elena stood by the window watching the children chase bubbles across the yard. A faint breeze carried their laughter inside, and she thought, this is what safety sounds like. That night, after the children were asleep, Gabriel joined her on the porch. The air was cool but gentle, filled with the scent of damp earth. "You ever think about where we'd be if not for that night in the snow?" he asked. "Every day," she said. Sometimes it scares me how easily our paths might never have crossed." He looked at her for a long time, then smiled. "Then I guess I owe Lila more than I can ever repay." "She has a good heart," Elena said softly. "Just like her father." They sat there a while longer, saying nothing, watching the stars appear one by one over the quiet neighborhood. By early summer, the Ward house had traded the hush of snow for the hum of open windows. The air smelled of lilac and new grass. Sunlight pooled across the kitchen floor each morning, where Noah took wobbly steps from chair to chair while Lila counted them aloud, cheering every time he made it farther. 7. He did 7, she shouted one morning. Gabriel, halfway through his coffee, looked up and grinned. Record breaker. Elena laughed as she caught Noah before he could topple. At this rate, he'll be chasing you around by next week. Their mornings had become a kind of gentle ritual. Breakfast together, the shuffle of backpacks and briefcases, a chorus of bye-byes at the door. Gabriel still left for meetings, but not the kind that kept him away until midnight. Most evenings he was home in time to help with dinner or listen to Lila's endless stories about school. Elena's schedule balanced neatly with his. She still worked on the outreach program, but had shifted more hours to remote planning, letting her spend afternoons at home. She discovered she liked the rhythm of ordinary days, folding laundry while Noah babbled in his playpen, reading with Lila in the garden, hearing Gabriel's key turn in the lock just as dusk settled. One Friday evening, Gabriel arrived carrying a small box tied with ribbon. "Company mail delivery," he said. Lila's eyes widened. "For me?" He knelt and handed it to her. Inside was a framed certificate printed in bright colors. "Kindness Ambassador, Lila Ward, for reminding us that one act of care can change a life." Her jaw dropped. "They made me an ambassador?" "They did," Gabriel said. "Because you started everything." Elena knelt beside her. "You saw someone who needed help, and you didn't look away. That's what leaders do." Lila threw her arms around both of them, nearly knocking over the frame. Best family ever. The moment felt small and vast at once. Gabriel met Elena's gaze over Lila's shoulder. Neither spoke, but both felt the same quiet truth. They'd built something that would last. July brought warmth that filled the house like music. On weekends, they visited the park or took drives to the lake outside the city. Lila collected smooth stones, Noah splashed at the shore, and Gabriel sometimes forgot completely about deadlines. He'd look over to see Elena laughing with the children and think that, after years of noise and emptiness, silence like this was a gift. One afternoon, while Noah napped and Lila colored on the porch, Gabriel found Elena in the kitchen arranging flowers from their garden. Sunlight spilled across the counter, catching the fine dusting of pollen on her fingertips. "Those from Lila's patch?" he asked. "She insisted we bring them inside before the rain," Elena said. "She says the house feels happier when there are flowers." She might be right. He leaned against the doorway. "You've made it a home." She looked up, startled by the softness in his voice. "We did," she corrected. He smiled. "We did." Later that night, they sat in the yard after the children were asleep. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and cut grass. Fireflies flickered among the hedges. Gabriel rested his elbows on his knees, watching the lights wink and vanish. "Remember how cold that first night was?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded. "I remember thinking I might never be warm again." He glanced at her. "And now? Now I think warmth isn't about weather." She paused, then added, "It's about people." They fell silent, listening to the gentle rhythm of summer, the chirp of crickets, the soft creak of the porch swing. The years of struggle that had shaped them both seemed far away, softened by distance and time. A few weeks later, Lila's school held a small recital. She'd been practicing for months, tiny fingers learning to dance across the piano keys. When her turn came, she sat straighter than usual, glanced toward the audience, and smiled at the familiar faces in the front row, her father, Elena, and baby Noah waving a stuffed rabbit. The melody was simple but clear, filling the hall with lightness. Gabriel felt his chest tighten with pride. When the final note faded, applause rose, and Lila's eyes found his. She beamed. Afterward, as they walked home beneath a sky streaked with rose and gold, Lila reached for both their hands. Did you hear me mess up a little? Gabriel squeezed her hand. I heard you keep going. That's what matters. Elena smiled. That's what life is too, playing through the mistakes. Lila nodded solemnly, then grinned. Then we're all pretty good musicians. That evening, they celebrated with ice cream on the porch. Noah smeared chocolate on his cheeks. Lila tried to teach him to clink spoons like toasting glasses. Gabriel leaned back, listening to their laughter mingle with the hum of cicadas. When Elena came out with napkins, he said softly, I don't think I ever thanked you properly for staying. She set the napkins down and looked at him. You already did. Every day. The porch light flickered on as twilight deepened. Somewhere inside, a clock chimed 9. The sound of the children's laughter drifted into the quiet night, steady and sure. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt the weight of what had been, only the lightness of what was. Late summer settled over the city in a haze of gold. The garden behind the house buzzed with bees, and the flowers Lila had planted months ago now stood tall and proud, bending gently toward the sun. Life had found its rhythm again. Gabriel's company ran smoothly, Elena's outreach programs had expanded, and evenings were filled with the easy noise of a household at peace. One Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains as Lila sat at the dining table, drawing with a box of colored pencils. Noah was nearby in his playpen, happily clapping at the sound of birds outside. Elena was sorting laundry when Lila spoke, her tone soft but curious. Miss Elena, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Lila hesitated, the pencil hovering above the paper. Do you remember my mommy? Elena froze for half a heartbeat, then set the laundry basket down. I've seen her picture, she said gently. Your daddy's told me about her. She loved you very much. Lila nodded slowly. Daddy says she went to heaven, but sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like. She looked up, eyes wide and unsure. Does that mean I'm forgetting her? Elena's heart tightened. She sat beside her and took her hand. No, Lila. It just means you're growing. Memories change shape, but love doesn't go away. Daddy said she liked the piano. Is that true? Elena smiled. He said she used to play while he worked. That's why he loves listening to you practice. Lila thought about that for a long moment. Then she whispered, Do you think she'd like you? Elena blinked back, sudden warmth in her eyes. I hope so. I think she'd be glad to see how loved you are. At that moment, Gabriel walked in, catching the edge of the conversation. He stopped, his gaze flickering between them. Lila turned toward him. Daddy, were you listening? He nodded, setting down his coffee. I was. Do you miss Mommy? Every day, he said quietly. But when I see you smile, I remember her. And when I see how our home feels now. He glanced at Elena, then back to Lila. I think she'd be happy that we found new ways to love. Lila leaned against him. I think so too. For a while they just sat like that, 3 lives bound by loss and renewal, the morning light spilling across them. That afternoon, they went to the park for the annual summer fair. Children ran between stalls, the scent of popcorn and fresh lemonade filling the air. Lila tugged Gabriel toward the carousel, Noah babbling happily in Elena's arms. When they climbed onto the painted horses, Gabriel caught Elena's eye across the circle. The music started, a bright tune that rose into the warm air, and as the carousel began to turn, he saw her laughing with Noah, sunlight in her hair. For an instant, he thought of how far they'd come, from a night of cold and snow to this bright whirl of color and joy. After the ride, they found a patch of grass near the pond. Lila fed breadcrumbs to the ducks while Noah clapped each time one quacked. Gabriel stretched out beside them, his hand brushing the cool grass. You ever think, Elena said softly, about how much has changed in 1 year? He nodded. Sometimes it feels like we've lived a lifetime in 12 months. Do you ever miss the quiet? He smiled. No, not anymore. They watched the water shimmer in the afternoon sun. Lila turned suddenly and said, When Noah gets older, can we all still live together? Gabriel and Elena exchanged a look, one full of unspoken agreement. Yes, Gabriel said. For as long as you want. Lila grinned. Good. Because this is the best family ever. Noah babbled as if to agree, waving his arms. Elena laughed, her chest swelling with quiet joy. She looked at Gabriel and saw the peace she'd never thought she'd find again reflected back at her. That evening, after the children were asleep, the two adults sat on the porch steps. Crickets sang in the tall grass. A lantern glowed between them. "She's growing fast," Gabriel said. "Soon she'll be too big for bedtime stories." Elena smiled. "That's what happens. They grow, and we just keep being there." He nodded slowly. "When she asked about her mother today, I wasn't sure what to say. But you handled it perfectly." "I just told her the truth," Elena said. "That love doesn't go away." He looked out into the dark yard, thoughtful. Maybe that's what this whole year has been about, learning that love can change shape. Elena leaned back against the railing, the night breeze lifting her hair. It can break and still come back new. They sat quietly until the lantern's flame began to fade. The world around them felt still and alive at once, filled with the small sounds of a life continuing forward. Inside, on the living room table, Lila's drawing from earlier lay drying. It showed a bright sky, a family of 4, and just above them, in the corner, a figure drawn with pale yellow crayon, a woman smiling down from a cloud. At the bottom, in Lila's careful handwriting, were 4 words: "Mommy, we're okay now." Autumn crept back with crisp mornings and gold-edged leaves. A year had passed since that night in the snow when Lila's small voice had broken through the winter air. "Daddy, her baby is freezing." No one in the house ever said those words aloud anymore, but their echo lingered, changed now, softened into gratitude. The Ward home stood bright under the pale fall sky. Inside, the air smelled of apple pie and cinnamon. Lila and Noah were in the living room building towers of wooden blocks, laughter tumbling through the rooms like sunlight. Elena stirred a pot of soup on the stove. When Gabriel stepped in from the cool air outside, she turned, smiling. "You're early," she said. "I decided work could wait." He hung his coat. "Besides, I didn't want to miss the feast I'm smelling." "It's just soup." He tasted a spoonful, nodded. "The best kind." Noah crawled toward him, hands outstretched. Gabriel scooped him up and lifted him high, the boy squealing with delight. Lila ran in circles around them, shouting, "Catch me next, Daddy." Elena watched from the doorway. This simple chaos that had replaced silence, and felt the same quiet awe she felt every day. That evening, after dinner, they gathered by the fireplace. Lila curled up against Gabriel's side, a book open in her lap. "Daddy, can I read tonight?" "Go ahead," he said. Her small voice carried through the room, halting on a few words but sure on the rest. When she reached the last line, she looked up. "That one's my favorite ending," she said. Gabriel smiled. "Mine too." Noah clapped as though he agreed, and everyone laughed. The fire cracked softly. Outside, the wind brushed leaves against the windows like a lullaby. Elena leaned back, her eyes tracing the faces around her, the children's, Gabriel's, and felt the weight of a year settle into stillness. From cold pavement to this, warmth, laughter, belonging. She whispered, almost to herself, "We really made it." Gabriel heard. "We did," he said simply. Weeks passed. The outreach program opened a new shelter on the edge of the city. Gabriel and Elena attended the small ceremony together. Lila clutching a bouquet, she insisted on giving to the volunteers. When cameras flashed, Gabriel stepped aside so that Elena and the children stood in front. "Smile," someone called. They did, 4 faces framed by falling leaves. Later that night, as they drove home beneath a blanket of stars, Lila hummed softly in the back seat, and Noah slept against her shoulder. Gabriel reached over, his hand brushing Elena's. She didn't pull away. "Remember what you said," he murmured, "about warmth being about people." She nodded. "I still believe that." "So do I." Winter came again, but the season felt different now, no longer a threat, just another chapter. On the first snow of the year, Lila burst outside with Noah bundled in her old red scarf. "Daddy, Mommy, look. It's snowing." They joined her on the porch. Snowflakes caught in her hair as she spun, laughing. Noah reached out from Elena's arms to grab one, then blinked as it melted on his hand. Gabriel looked at them. The girl who had saved a stranger, the woman who had become family, the boy who had been given a chance to grow. and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, deep and steady. He slipped an arm around Elena's shoulders. "Cold?" he asked. She smiled. Not anymore. The world around them was white and quiet, but inside, everything was warm. If you enjoyed Daddy, Her Baby is Freezing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who could use a reminder that kindness can change everything. Turn on notifications so you never miss another heartwarming tale. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay warm out there. Red Heart.